So I'd like to start with Dr. onacloV, who's again done this fantastic job of communicating really one of the most important parts of the climate system, which is Antarctica. And maybe you could give us a little background of your thinking about how you went about designing this, what you're trying to do with it, and in particular, how you're using this to communicate aspects of science.
Well, what we focused on Antarctica primarily because locked within Antarctic ice is the longest record we have of climate. And so we wanted to communicate climate change very strongly in the installation. And we've done this in a number of different ways. We wanted the exhibition to be fun. We wanted it to be interactive. And so I actually, it was funny, I gave a lecture one day for a professor who was on leave, and a group of students ran up after me and said, "We want to create your installation, the idea I had for Inter-Antarctica, and we'd like to work with you." And I said, "Fantastic, that's wonderful." And the university enabled me to develop a special elective, and so I had 14 students working with me in the last year on Inter-Antarctica, and the idea developed that we wanted to use visualization technologies, so have a visualization of a data set, but have objects that had sounds that the viewers could pick up. It's a shame I'm not sitting in the installation because I could have showed you that physically, but when a viewer picks up an object in the installation, the objects make sounds and alter a data visualization that's on a tabletop that's sort of cut out of a huge map of Antarctica. So it's a sort of a fun way of learning about, say for example, we have a regular light globe, a sculpture of a regular light globe versus one of an energy efficient light globe, and depending on which object you pick up, you create different sounds and alter the visualization, so it kind of lets you know the impact that has by using a energy efficient light globe over a regular one. And so the audience because it's very experimental and new technology, they have found it quite fun because usually when you walk into an art gallery or museum, people aren't used to actually holding objects and making sounds, and we had a 8-channel sound system set up around the auditorium and I worked with a very talented sound designer and composer who derived just organic sounds taken from Antarctica. We got data from the Australian Antarctic Division, and so just pure sounds of ice cracking and ice breaking and the sound of wind and ice rubbing against ice, and he compilated these into these incredibly beautiful and dramatic sound compositions that come out of the objects that affect the visualization in the exhibition. I'm not sure if me explaining it with words makes sense to you, but
I think you've done a great job of getting us all enthusiastic about actually seeing it and holding it and hearing the sounds. And it reminds me of some of the patterns you get in nature. It was interesting that when I was at the Fenner School, one of the academics there took just some environmental data, a data stream, and just used that to drive a musical score. And you could actually hear the patterns of the data better than you could see the patterns of the data. So that sort of triggers in your mind the fact that we're so used to scientists to use visual cues to interpret our data, but sometimes audio cues can actually be more interesting. So I'll encourage you to see this exhibition if you get a chance. I'd like to ask Will now. You're in the Center for Public Awareness of Science. you're an expert at communicating science.
Well, I'm an expert at talking about it.
How do you respond to some of the innovative things that?
Look, I think it's great the stuff that onacloV's doing. I think it's a wonderful thing to bring an intuitive understanding to people about climate change. Climate change is a fantastically complicated thing, and I think to try and communicate it in a variety of different ways is what we need to be doing. We can't be just doing it in one journal article method, with tables and figures and perhaps a graph as a nice visual interlude. That's great for some people, but other people need to see other things. I think an ice core would work really well for me because I love the physicality of it. I love seeing the changes in time. That really works. But other people, will learn in different ways, and we need to be doing that. I think as well, we need to be thinking about localising how we talk about climate change a lot more as well, bringing it down to people's lives. This river here is in danger, that your farm is in danger in certain ways. So I think it's about bringing these things to people's lives.
The music of whales is what I was thinking about as I listened to Dr. onacloV. I mean, there's no more powerful statement of the need to preserve whales than listening to them singing and talking to each other. Another thing, The Age of Stupid. Has anybody seen it? It is a fantastic movie, and I would like everybody to see The Age of Stupid. I just saw it in Adelaide 2 days ago. In my own work, I've tried to convey science to non-scientists, and I agree it is extremely complex, climate science. Andrew Glikson tried for 3 months to teach it to me, and I still don't really understand. But trying to get that across through metaphor, through literature. I loved composing epigraphs for each of my chapters because I realised all this wisdom in the world's literature that's actually applicable to climate change. So a bit of Shakespeare here, a bit of Buddha there, a bit of Sinclair Lewis there, and it really helps. And I also tried to look for iconic figures of people who stood out against the conventional wisdom of their time and were proved to be right. And William Wilberforce, who taught the people of England at the turn of the 19th century that slavery was evil and they could not rest their economy on this terrible slave trade. Keynes, who did the same thing, saying that having 2 million people permanently unemployed is unacceptable, and the invisible hand of economic theory is just not good enough if it produces that sort of perennial outcome. So I think that what we really need to do is to use every possible means, literature, metaphor, example, comparison, to try and get climate science understandable to ordinary people. And I agree entirely that we've got to make it local. It is terrible what's happening to Kiribati and Tuvalu. It is terrible what's happening to polar bears. But it's even more terrible, I'm sorry, what's happening to your and my children.
I think the idea of fun and climate change just don't work for me, I'm afraid. It's too dark and spooky a story, and making it fun doesn't work. There's no magic bullet communicating science, the science of climate change. The kind of stuff we get the end of the Great Barrier Reef, the end of the Murray-Darling Basin, you get all these, more and more you get the kind of reports that talk about our children and everything. What happens is people get used to it. And as a bit of the reef dies, okay, I'm used to it, I'm expecting it. And so I don't necessarily think that kind of message works. It's a bit like being told you've got cancer. For the first, few days, that's all you can think of. But as the months go by, and you've got a certain prediction about, when you're going to die, you start going back to barbecues and enjoying life again. And I think the same kind of cognitive dullness comes across the society as they get more and more of these messages about the kind of outcomes that climate change is going to cause.
I think that there's something interesting in that I can understand your worry about making things fun. That climate change is a very, very serious issue. But I think we have to step away from the doomsday scenarios a little bit. Yes, the Great Barrier Reef is dying and probably will die. We need to step away from that and say climate change is actually also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to rejig our economy, to say let's get rid of non-renewable energy because one day it's going to run out. Whether it's any source, that's another problem. It's not climate change's problem, but it's going to happen. Why not say, well, let's get renewable energies in. Let's solve some other problems at the same time. I think that it is a terrible thing, but it's also an opportunity for us to make good decisions.